Amanda from Pontes Books here with the Chapter 21 fun fact for The Prince and the Pauper. Today's fun fact is another one, kind of like the vocabulary word for Chapter 21, that is a carryover from Chapter 20. Really, it's like a part two. The two chapters go together. So in this chapter, in Chapter 20, at the very end, Edward is tied up by the hermit. And, you know, he's sleeping while this is all happening, but then obviously he wakes up. And then that's when we kind of transfer into 21. So this is kind of a continuation. So for our fun fact for today, I wanted to look at a piece of advice that could have helped out our friend Edward, because unfortunately he wasn't able to get out of those ropes, but did end up being rescued anyway. But my fun fact for today is escaping from being tied up. What are some tips if you ever are unfortunate enough to find yourself in a situation where you are, being held captive and you're tied, and hopefully that never happens to anyone, but these are some tips for how to get out if you find yourself in Edward's situation. So in the story, as I said, it starts in chapter 20, but here's where the bonds or the ties get referenced in chapter 21. So this is toward the end of the chapter. He finished with a gasp and at once fell to struggling so frantically with his bonds again that he shook off the smothering sheepskin. So in this chapter, we have Edward, who has his hands tied, I believe his feet also tied, he's been gagged, and the hermit threw a piece of sheepskin over him to try kind of muffle the sound. So he's unable to make enough noise to alert Miles, who actually ends up showing up, that he's there. And he hears the conversation, and this is kind of after all that. So this is kind of his last ditch effort to be heard, basically. So he's struggling frantically with his bonds, but he's unable to break free. So that's what we're focusing in on today. So how to escape ropes. I focused in on ropes specifically here because that's likely what, how he was tied up. So a lot of escaping from ropes actually has to do with what you are doing when you're being tied up. Now, Edward couldn't have changed this situation because he was asleep while this was happening. But if you are ever in a situation, someone is starting to tie you up, the idea is to make yourself as big as possible before the actual knots are tied. So flex your muscles, puff up your chest. If you're holding your wrists, if you hold them like this, then there's some space, some wiggle room that then when you put your arms together, you can use that slack to help you break free. So that's kind of step one. And then once the captors are gone, you shrink yourself back down as much as possible, and then work your hands to loosen the ropes or knots. So you're stretching, you're pushing, you're moving your arms up and down. There's all sorts of different movements specifically that you can try and do to try and loosen those knots and get out of those ropes. So some other helpful tips too. One of the commonly seen things is that if there is a pointed object that is sticking out of the wall or a chair, like a spike or a hook, you can use that to help you work the ropes loose. If you are bound, like your hands, your feet, everything, like trying to free your hands first so that you can get yourself free the rest of the way. Also, if you're gagged, you can try rubbing your face or your head against a wall or furniture to just slip it over your chin. Obviously, then you can yell for help or, use your mouth also to help getting these knots out as well. So then I found a demonstration by a man who's a survivalist, basically, and he does lots of these tips for how to escape. So he goes into various materials that could, bind you, and some ways to possibly escape. So I'll let the video take it from here.
If you take your hand and you go open and close, you can feel the muscles in your forearm contract. When you have a fist, your forearm is small. When you have your hand open, this big. So you want to create slack by open hands. Then you're going to pull those hands, your elbows, and you're going to shoot them past your rib cage as hard and violently as you can. And it turns your body into a wedge, and the tape will shear. It'll look like it's been cut with scissors. That will work with duct tape and zip ties, but anything beyond that, you have to get more creative. Wiggle or use tools around you. Friction, you can use the corner of a wall and cut your way out. If you find yourself being bound, the good idea is to get big. Take a big breath if they're trying to wrap around your chest. Flex your muscles. Make everything as big as possible. That way, when it's time to escape, you get small. And all of a sudden, all that slack appears, and now you can wiggle out or get out of the restraints however you can. Probably the easiest thing to do to be more preemptive and proactive is carry a razor blade and carry a handcuff key. You can hide them in your shoes. That way, if you're bound in front or bound from behind, you can still squat down and get to your shoes and free yourself. If you don't have any of those on you, you can't get to your tools. You really just have to think outside the box and find different things in your environment that you can either, friction through it, run through it, cut it, shear it, whatever it takes to get it going so that you can free yourself.
All right, so hopefully you learned something about how to escape if you are ever tied up or restrained in any way. Have a good rest of your day.